Welcome to the Growth Experts Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Colin. Today, we have the Honorable James Rosebush. He is the CEO and founder of Growth Strategy Incorporated. How you doing today?
I'm just great, and all the better to see you, Derek.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to kind of dive in and learn about growthstrategy.us. Can you share a bit about your role, background, and how it fits into the bigger picture at Growth Strategy?
Sure, I'm happy to. When I finished my 6 years in the Reagan White House, I thought that I would go back into running one family office or one foundation, and there weren't any great opportunities at that moment. And I had been nominated by the president as a U.S. ambassador, but as the car was driving me to the Senate for my confirmation, we heard on the radio the news that this was going to be I was going to be U.S. ambassador to UNESCO, and
Yeah.
the Senate had pulled out of the U.S. pull out of that organization. So I went back to the White House, and then for a little while more, and then I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. And as I say, I thought that it would be running one particular family office or company. That did not; those opportunities were not apparent. And what was in their place was six different companies who wanted to basically hire me as an advisor. And that included Saudi Arabia, Coca-Cola Company, a bunch of really great companies. And I thought, well, I think that they're showing me the way. So the next thing I had to do was I accepted their interest in me and that they were going to hire me for a number of different things, which were very interesting to me. But I had to decide what to call my company. And I thought, and I've always believed in this, and my dad always taught me this. He said, when I was a kid and I was mowing lawns or, cleaning carpets or whatever I did, I was always an entrepreneur. But he would
Yeah.
say, name your company what you do. Name
Mm.
your company what you do, which is not always, you don't see this. Let's say Chrysler Corporation. If you didn't know that Chrysler was a car, you wouldn't know what Chrysler does. So his advice was always to name your company what you do. So I thought about it a lot, and I decided that my passion is growing things. I love to grow things. I love to grow assets. I like to grow companies. I like to grow, a lot of different things. And the way I like to do it is through strategy. So I named my company Growth Strategy, and I thought, well, this is going to be great. People are going to understand exactly what I'm doing, and they're going to retain me, and all this sort of thing. Well, it was very interesting because after I launched the company with that name, I was ridiculed, sort of soft ridicule, by the heads of a lot of important big time consulting firms. And they said, growth strategy? We'd never heard of anything like that. That's the most ridiculous thing. You're calling your advisory firm, you're calling it growth strategy. And I'm like, well, okay, but I'm going to stick with it. And this is what happened. So I would say maybe 3 to 4 years after I launched my company, you began to see large, really serious, big management consulting firms start to talk about growth strategy. And in other words, how to grow your company or your assets and to do it strategically. And it wasn't, I certainly didn't believe it was because of me, but it was the growing interest in more growth for industries and companies of all different types, but then how to gain that growth. And
Mhm.
that was really an explanation for all the hundreds and hundreds of companies that I have worked with all around the world. My passion is to
Yeah.
grow their business, help grow their business. And how do you do it? Through creating a strategy. So it's
Of course.
simple but complicated in the same way.
So, what does a typical day look like for the Honorable James Rosebush?
There's no typical day. Do any of us have a typical day? I don't think. I usually wake up in the morning. I shared this with you, Derek, a little
I
earlier. I
mean,
usually
in business, not
I know, but
personal.
it has everything to do with business. It's how you wake
Okay.
up, because
Yeah.
ideas usually, at least for me, I'm sure it's probably a majority of other people as well. You wake up
Mm.
either thinking, "Oh no, I have to do that," or you wake up, "Oh, I get to do that." And so it's the ideas, or used to call it ideation for a while. That was a cool term, ideation. It was new
Yeah.
ideas. But this was, all the things that you would suspect that I had responsibility for. And I just went ahead with it.
So waking up with purpose and having a positive mindset, if you will. Do you wake up early? What does a typical day look like for you when you start your day and service clients? Or are you very busy? Can you kind of walk us through the process from a high level?
Man, Derek, you're going to be very disappointed in me. I am a night person. I am not a morning person. So
Okay.
maybe that's why the forces are trying to wake me up and tell me. But I mean, I do wake up early and go to work. But it's a very strange thing. I don't know if you're a. I think the world is divided into morning and night people. I think for good purpose and for
Yeah.
good reason. So I have to say that at night around 9 p.m. my
Mhm.
body or my mind thinks I'm starting a whole new day.
Oh, okay.
And so, and then when in the morning, I'm not wired up. I don't know what you are. Are you morning or are you night?
Well, I just adjust to my body's circadian rhythm, if I said that correctly, in terms of day and night. So I get as much sun as I can early in the morning. So I'm a early bird.
See, that's what I'm telling you. And I think that probably the world thinks that morning people are better than night people. But, it's something I can't change. I mean, as I say, I get up, I travel a lot. So I get on early flights, all that sort of thing. And I do it, but I'm not engaged to the degree that I am at 9 o'clock at night. So it's just
Okay.
kind of interesting. But I would say that, you have to wake up, you have responsibilities. And also when you're
Yeah.
on different time zones, you have to, because I worked a lot in Europe. I've also worked for Saudi Arabian families. And, also because of my work going back to the White House, I was negotiating with a lot of different countries. I was in China, I was in South Korea, I was in Japan, I was all over
Wow.
Europe, all that sort of thing. So I'm used to the time zone change, but it's a little bit of a challenge for me in the morning. So anyway, I get up and I get going, understanding what my clients are really looking for.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Switch gears here. So what major shifts are you seeing in your industry right now?
Well, I think obviously there's a lot going on with the war, and there's a lot of uncertainty. I think
Mm.
that people don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen. Not so much with the war, but how it affects our economy. And I think also you see a tremendous amount of change in terms of our relationship with Western Europe, which
Yeah.
has been disturbing to me because I'm from Europe originally. I mean, my family, generations before, and also I spent a lot of time in Western Europe, both with the
Mm.
president and in my own business. And I had to figure this out: why, basically, the U.S. In this administration has turned away from Western Europe, where they have been our closest allies, but at the same time, I recognize that Western Europe did not stand up for its own defense to the degree that they need to. And so I understand this bit of backing away from Western Europe and basically getting them to take responsibility for their defense, for their industry, for how we share industrial products, and also with tariffs and with finance, that all goes into it as well. So there are other parts of the world, namely what's happened with Venezuela and the responsibility of the U.S. to the lower half of our, South America, North America, and our relationship there. I think it's good to have attention on that. So I think there's a lot of, if not anxiety, there's a lot of uncertainty on the part of people who run companies and businesses to figure out where it's going. Because in particular in this administration, and that's not to say that the presidential administration controls everything by any stretch of the imagination. We have a lot of large industrial companies in the U.S. that, they're grown up, they have a lot of
Mhm.
experience, and they can move forward in the best way that they think, with the best strategies. But of course, our government has a lot to do with finance, in particular, as you know, with taxes and with other things that
Mhm.
affect the growth or the not so much growth of these companies in all different industrial sectors. So whether it's finance or whether it is digital development or all the other streams of basically where the US economy sits. And when I say the US economy, it's really a global economy. And you can see that especially when one of the most, I think, probably serious conversations we have at home is, or in the office, the price of gasoline to fuel your car. People are concerned
Yeah.
about that, which is a short-term problem, I believe. And I'm sure it's a short-term problem. But these are all things that have to be taken into consideration for any company, whether you're a large multinational corporation or whether you are a mid-sized company that has a good growth strategy and a good track
Mhm.
record. I mean, I was just speaking to someone today about the reinvention of a clothing company, Gap, and how, which I think is a great company. I bought a lot of products there myself. You may have, but uh,
Yeah,
these
there's
companies,
Gap, I believe there's Gap, Banana Republic, and
right?
what Old Navy. It's like a chain of them.
Yeah, those are three that were basically, I think, put together by the original founder. So they've been struggling, but Gap is like has a whole new force, I guess, behind it, is doing extremely well. That's the report I got today. But these companies do it largely because either they have a new CEO or a new team that is brighter than the one before. Like you see problems with another, a group of companies in this same industry
Yeah.
that are struggling to have the kind of clientele and customer base that they really need, and they have to address it one way or
Yeah.
the other. But Boeing is another good example. Why Boeing fails to a big degree is its inability to communicate with the public or with shareholders. They're not good about that at all. And I think that unfortunately there are a lot of CEOs that do not know the importance of relating to either your customers or to your shareholders in the right way. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I love to work with these CEOs on how you improve your ability to basically build a relationship to your shareholders and your customers. There's a big lack in that, and I think there's a big lack in the whole field of leadership today, which is costly.
So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to global economy and the administration, I do see that there's a lot of changes, but I wouldn't bet that this is going to last forever. There's always a solution to the problem, and I think they're going to fix it pretty soon when it comes to gas prices. However, how has this administration or tariffs or whatever impacted your business or growth strategy? Has it, or has it made it stronger?
Well, there are two answers to that. I get more and more business when people feel that they need my help, which is to help them, let's say, a particular division of their company or a group of employees. I had a wonderful, this is years ago, but I had a wonderful engagement with JP Morgan. And JP Morgan wanted me to basically to readjust, to use a careful term, I suppose, their private wealth business. And what I discerned was they had wonderful people in this division. It was an enormous division. They had many clients, but the managers that were handling their private wealth business were not as interested in the client as I thought they should, and that they should learn more about what these particular clients might be really calling for or interested in. And
Mhm.
so what we did is we divided up. I had the eastern part, I think the third part of the US, maybe from Mississippi to the Atlantic, and then down up from, let's say, I think down from Boston and down into Florida. Well, that meant that investors are not all the same, and the where they live and what their activity is in terms of their business or their wealth has a lot to do with where they live and their traditions and so forth. And so I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we look at the different types of clients that need the advice and the management of JP Morgan Private Wealth Division? And so it was a really wonderful, interesting thing to see. So what I did is I took divisions of that part of geography, and I said, well, the wealth that's coming out of, for example, let's say Kentucky, there's a tremendous amount of wealth in horse breeding, for example. Not all wealth comes from horse breeding, but there's a lot of it. These people have particular interests and needs in terms of the management of their wealth than you might find in Miami. So the interests of and the value to these clients to be found in JP Morgan, the wealth division needed to be more attentive to what these people were interested in, especially in family offices and in wealthy families. So that really through that, we were able to accelerate the adoption of new clients in the private wealth division with significant percentages. And that was through learning to understand your client and their unique needs better than just saying, here are a bunch of strategies that we have for you, and this is what we think is going to be good for you. And so it was a part of real transitioning from, okay, we've developed investment products here that we think are good for you. Which ones are you interested in? And turning it to, what are your greatest concerns? What are the things you're interested in? And then developing, investment strategies that would be unique and developed basically for those families. So it's a very interesting exercise, and I was involved with them for a few years developing that. So that's an example how you go into a company to develop a new strategy to grow. So what we wanted to do there, and we were successful with it. We grew the assets of that division of that company, but based on identifying what the need really was. Because very often, you don't want to be finger pointing in particular at any individuals or even any leaders, but I've also had experiences with companies, for example, where the CEO is not particularly articulate in working with shareholders, customers, employees, that sort of thing. And I've had great experience with any number of companies on this. One example was Salesforce, which was a great client with really a lot of great people, and they're huge and highly successful, but communication was a challenge. And that was one of my favorite things to do. That was another one of my favorite companies. So they're not all as large as that. They can be really any size, but it depends on what their need really is. And a lot of times companies, they understand that they need my help, or they need the help of other people to do what I do, some of them, but they can't identify exactly what they need. And sometimes they're led in the wrong direction by people who work for them, even though they're certainly attempting to do it in the right way. But I see this. I've also worked with any number of, I would say, exceptional billionaire types who have done extremely well buying and selling companies. And they know that they want to be good leaders. And so my coaching for them had to do with how you develop leadership, how you treat your employees.
Yeah.
And does that really matter? It's really fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like you're able to strategically kind of go in and help identify bottlenecks and frustrations so that you can start scaling or helping them scale and identify those pit holes, if you will. So
that's a good way to say it.
Tell me,
that's a good way to say it. I mean, where are the opportunities, and do you have the capacity or the understanding? It's basically, there's a lot of failure, I would say, or lack. I take back failure, but a lack or opportunity to understand your clientele better.
Yeah.
And people, you walk into a store, recently I got rid of a car that I didn't like, and I went shopping for another car. And some of the places I went, oh man, they were right on it. They were not trying to sell me. They wanted to know, what my issues were with the car that I just got rid of. What would I be interested in? They handled me brilliantly. And a couple of the other firms were just, they weren't that interested. And it's really fascinating to see. I think the consumer today, and we're all consumers, and we're all related to all of these companies that are either, strategically important to us or materially important to us. And I think customers or investors really want to be handled in a way that a lot of companies don't, let's say they need help in developing that kind of those relationships.
Yeah. And what would you want people to know that are listening to this podcast that may fit the bill in terms of, needing growth or needing, your services for, growth and a growth strategy?
Well, that's a good question. I think that a lot of people are interested in me because of my years in the White House with a president who is very widely respected. No real controversy with him. And I think also they know that he's called the great communicator. And I grew up, I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not, but my father was a teacher of Dale Carnegie public speaking. So at age 7, I had to learn how to be a little 7-year-old. Needed to learn how to give a speech in front of people. And it was a wonderful lesson for me. And then later to have the honor of going to the White House with a president who's called the great communicator. So I think that a lot of times, these are, I have 3 different silos, so I work with family offices and wealthy families, and I work with corporations, and then I do the coaching as well. So I have 3 different pillars, and they're all really related to each other. There's nothing really exceptionally different, except what the need is. So that pillar on the right, where people need to learn how to communicate, is a critical skill. And it's one of my very favorite things to do, because people will come out of, I had, for example, a person who was a president of a company, and I worked with him on his speeches. And he had a reasonably hard time. He was speaking to groups, and he was been a very, very important job. Did not come easily for him. And he was, one day, he told me that he had been invited to give a very important speech, and he was very nervous about it. And so I wrote this speech, and we worked on it, and he called me. So let's say, I don't know, we worked on it for probably a month or a month and a half. And he called me the 5 minutes after he concluded his speech, and he said, "Jim, you're not going to believe what happened." And I thought, oh no, there's some disaster. And he had, I could tell, he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "You're not going to believe what happened. I got a standing ovation." Now, I said to him, that is absolutely phenomenal. Look what what you've done and what you have now become accustomed to. And it was just a big transition in his life, learning how to speak to the public. And it was a thrill for me because he was happy. And now, he's gone on to being a public speaker in other places as well, and speaking comfortably. So that's a part of that coaching part that I love to do. I think on the side of companies, there could be all different kinds of firms, a lot of investment companies. I mentioned one in JP Morgan. Another one was the company that invented electronic whiteboards that go in offices. Mm-hmm. They said to me, "Okay, we want to give you a charge here, and your responsibility is to open up an entire market in the United States." They were a Canadian firm. So they said, basically, we want to see schools, and I'm talking about everything from elementary schools to universities. We want to see our whiteboards, electronic whiteboards, in school classrooms, but they hadn't done it. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, how am
Mhm.
I going to do this? So what I did is I investigated and I went to each of these cities. I investigated about 15 different, let's say, school districts. And I tried to determine what those what of those school systems all around the country would be most likely to be interested in buying these. So I chose four different very large public school systems. For example, like L.A., Houston, New York City, so forth. Now I determined that they would probably be most interested in this, but this is what I did first. I went to the philanthropic foundations in those cities and I said, if I bring and I see interest in these classrooms, these public schools, where they really need these whiteboards, would you be willing to make philanthropic commitments as gifts to the school department to pay for these electronic whiteboards? And in every case, they all committed. So when I went to the school superintendent and I said, here is, for example, I have, I can give you 100 of these free, but I've arranged for such and such a foundation, a community foundation, to help pay for these. And they were like, oh, they were immediately awake. They wanted boards for every classroom. So that was sort of this was a strategy. And that's a good example with what strategy is for a company. How do you build and grow a company? Well, that was one way that I did that. And I got into those sectors that wanted to have electronic whiteboards on their walls. So that's just a little example. On the family office side, I've worked with uh, many dozens and dozens of family offices that have all kinds of challenges related from I do beauty contests for investment managers. I get kids into their children into schools. I basically reposition the way their family office works. But it all comes down to relationship with the families and what they need, which isn't often a lot of people go into family office management assuming that they're going to be basically they're going to be their investment managers, which is important, but I do more of a holistic approach to helping wealthy families on anything, as I say, from education for their kids to getting kids into drug rehab, which I've done, buying and selling real property, and I love to do that too. So it's I have these three pillars. It's kind of unique, but it's I think all we do, like you, Derek, the best kind of thing that you can imagine is that you're doing what you like and what your calling is, and
Yeah.
you're so
Yeah.
good at having these great shows and talking with interesting people, and I've had the good fortune of doing things that I'm well suited for and that make me happy and
Yeah.
keep me
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotta at least be motivating to, when you wake up at the crack of dawn to move forward, especially when you're providing a service and you're changing lives and you're providing growth strategies for years to come. That's gonna, develop and build exponential growth and productivity for businesses because that good is contributes towards economic growth. It contributes towards someone's lifestyle. It contributes towards someone paying their bills and their rents. There's a lot of factors that are at play with that, and it all trickles down. So, kudos to you, James, for being able to provide a strategic growth service and strategies for certain organizations like Salesforce, etc. So that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me, the Honorable James Rosebush, ladies and gentlemen. And if you want to check him out, he is located on LinkedIn. You can look him up. And I will put his website in the description below. If there's any interest, you can go to growthstrategy.us. That's growthstrategy.us. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Derek. I enjoyed it.
Pleasure.